Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of Manitou Springs City Council. It's a work session. It is June the 13th, 2023. With that, I'll do the roll call. Councilor Weatherholt,
Present.
Councilor Chandler,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Fortune,
Present.
Councilor Shada, Councilor Johnson,
Here.
Councilor Wolf,
Here.
and the mayor is also present. Okay, great. So we all showed up for work. All right, we have 3 discussion items tonight. The first is discussion of PPRTA funding. We have representatives PPRTA, but I think we're going to have Denise kick this off with a little overview.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As you recall, I presented this in May with the PPRTA and with a spreadsheet and with some additional information. You gave the guidance to the mayor to go back and talk to PPRTA and to see, to do some negotiations. So a couple of things that is new in today's packet. If you look at page 5, it's a revised spreadsheet, which shows the amount and the difference. And the biggest thing there is, of course, in 2006, we got 2.2 million, a little over 2.2 million in a allocation to do the downtown redevelopment. So that was a pretty substantial amount at that point. And then you can look at it by year. Overall, we've received $339,071 is the difference from what we've contributed over the last 18 years to what we have received. So in the packet, you receive some information from Andy and his team, which talks about what they would like to present to the PPRTA board, which is a one-time $600,000 payment to Manitou Springs to make that difference up, which is more than what we have done over the last 18 years. So it's about double. And it would be a one-time adjustment. And then they also talk about how they would like to go back and look at their allocations and do that over time. So with that, I can definitely open it up to questions. And I do have the PPRTA group here who can also address any questions or concerns you might have.
Okay, thank you. And I would remind council that the PPRTA board meets tomorrow afternoon. So the direction that we come up with tonight is what I will be carrying into the meeting tomorrow. So just if you all bear that in mind. We have several representatives here. We have Rick Sonnenberg, who's the executive director for PPRTA, and Andy Gunning, executive director for PPACG, which is the parent organization for PPRTA. So Rick, I don't know if you want to make comments first, or if we just kind of open up the council discussion. You have the opportunity to take the floor if you'd like to respond to questions as they come up. That's okay too. Right. Okay, so if you'd each introduce yourself, and I think if you just give us your title, that'll be fine.
Rick Sonnenberg, PPRTA Program and Contracts Manager.
Andy Gunning, PPACG Executive Director.
Lisa Corey, I am the finance manager for PPRTA.
Great, thank you. And I see we also have Jim Gibney here. He's the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee, which does a lot of the real work. So Jim, we appreciate you being here.
So as the council will recall, when I was here several weeks ago, I pledged that we would go back and work on a package. That package is in your packet. It's has 3 elements to it. We did individual discussions with our board members. We did not have a board meeting. We did not violate the sunshine law. So this is an informal proposal to the Manitou Springs City Council. It is expected to be ratified by our board tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. And we would appreciate your consideration of it. And we can, however you respond, we can take that back. Either I can or Mayor Graham can take it back to our board tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. So I'm stand available for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. And council, I think the items in the packet, you saw Rick's letter. It's relatively brief. And it includes that, as Denise mentioned, a one-time allocation of $600,000, which we could use. And I think our expectation is that we would apply it at the Hiawatha Gardens. And also the suggestion here, a commitment by the board is how it's stated. So that's what it is. For revising the board practice or changing the fifth amended and restated governmental agreement, which is, there's a lot of legal work there, but I think board practice may be the more pragmatic approach. But it's an offer by PPRTA to do that. I think it's been I think it's a generous and a very reasonable offer. So I'll open that up to council discussion. Nancy?
I think it's important to note that you, Denise, or I met with all the members of the PPRTA pretty much separately, and that this was the proposal that they seem to be coalescing around. Nothing's final till it's final, but there did seem to be some interest, genuine positive interest in this proposal.
Yeah, that's correct. We had an initial meeting with in which Denise and Nancy and I were at, along with Rick, Andy, and representatives of Colorado Springs. That was our initial discussion. And then Nancy, you'd met with the 3 county commissioners who were on the PPRTA board, and I've since spoken with the representatives from Green Mountain Falls, Rama, and Callahan. And I think we've been able to explain our situation pretty well. I had some questions. I think they were intelligent questions, and I think I responded to them reasonably well. So I think we're in a fairly good situation. I mean, we'll know tomorrow for sure, but I think this proposal would be considered acceptable by PPRTA. With that, do we have further discussion, or Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. Since I wasn't privy to the discussions, I'd like to ask first, how did you arrive at the $600,000 figure? What went into that calculus?
Rick, do you want to take a stab at that, or you want me to take a cut? I could try, and then you could correct me if I'm wrong.
Please do, Mayor.
Okay, and don't worry, when I'm wrong, people let me know. I think one, and you can look at that spreadsheet, and there's a lot of ways of looking at it. I think in our discussion with Colorado Springs, they were kind of gravitating around a number of like 325,000. Well, that's more than what we have gotten. So that didn't seem like a completely bad answer. And then on our side, and a lot of it's to Denise's credit, we thought $1 million might be a more palatable number to Manitou. And as it went along, one of the county commissioners said, let's split the difference. And with a complete application of intellectual firepower, we came up with 600,000. So it's, I wouldn't say it was deep rocket science, but that's how we got there.
Thank you for that. I would just like to make a couple of comments, since one of the things, number 2 on your list, was to consider revising board practice in the future. I understand there's a lot of moving parts to this, not the least of which is, you know, a portion of the reason why, you know, we've kind of been in the red here on this is the recreational marijuana sales. And we don't know what is going to happen in the near and far future regarding that. We also have the question in the future, perhaps, of Fountain joining our group. And so, and thirdly, I was thinking a little bit more long-term about, in 7 years, we're going to have another census. And in 2030, my prediction is Manitou will not really grow very much, but I see the population in Colorado Springs growing exponentially, and therefore also El Paso County, which might change the calculus. So what I would like to see is a more regular accounting. It was really nice to see this, so see where we're at and where we can look to go in the future. I'm not opposed to this agreement tonight. However, if you're going to think in the future about board practice, one of the things that I think you have to think about, and I hope you do, is that the 90-10 split, only 10% of funding goes to transit. And I think in this era of climate change and pollution and social inequality, we have to think about where do we want to spend those dollars, and how is that really going to affect our community? Do we want to put more concrete on the road, or do we want to invest in more public transit? So I just really hope that that's part of the ongoing conversation. And I think that we need to revisit this on a more regular basis. So I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Other counselors? Julie?
I'd like to mimic everything that was just said. I agree with that. I'm just concerned that it looks like every year, with the exception of occasional big influxes of money, we're losing over 200,000 a year. And so 600,000 sounds great, but we'll have lost that much in, 3 more years or 2.5 more years anyway. But perhaps if if the whole formula for calculating Manitou's share is revisited, maybe that won't continue to be a problem, but that's a huge problem. When I voted personally last time for us to continue with the PPRTA, I had no idea that we were losing all this money. And to me, I think your average resident would not say, oh, I don't mind all this tax money going to repair roads in Colorado Springs rather than here, because after all, I do go to Colorado Springs sometime. I saw that apologetic in the memo, and I don't find it persuasive considering the other needs we have. We may have a very small population here, but we have a huge influx, as you know, of visitors. And that's why we need so much more assistance with public transit. But if the formula is always just going to look at our population, as Judith said, we're going to be deeper and deeper in the hole every year once that census is redone. So at the moment, I'm on the fence, but I'm really concerned that the 600,000 is such a nice big number, but we'll lose that much in the next 2.5 years anyway. So it's really not a long-term fix.
Thank you. Other counselors? Nancy?
Yeah, and I think that that's an understandable concern. I will tell you that in my working with the PPRTA staff and the board members, I was very impressed and quite frankly surprised at the willingness to take this issue very, very seriously and consider how to ensure that everything is fair in the future. So I think from my perspective, I think that genuine commitment is shown by the 600K if we get that. And the willingness to look at this for the future. And then if it continues to be completely out of whack, I have confidence in the process again to salve the wound, as Rick has said, which I thought that was a good way to say it. But so I am very pleased with this proposal, and I would recommend that we have our mayor supported at the PPRTA meeting tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you. Other comments? Natalie?
I guess I'm also comfortable with you moving forward and advocating for us in this way tomorrow. But additionally, I would like us to have conversations about how money can be spent differently, like an emphasis on transportation and whatnot. But I do feel like that's coming. But I do look forward to those conversations and your updates as you move forward.
Okay, I understand. And that's, I think that's a good point. And this year I was thinking I try to keep the council briefed a little more about what's going on. And I think, for instance, and this isn't, it wouldn't be apparent really too much of it to anyone in Manitou Springs, except that within the purview of the work that's anticipated, there's major reconstruction work planned for Highway 24. So the intersection of 21st, 31st, I believe, well, certainly Ridgeway or Ridge Road and maybe even 26th. And there's, some comments about grade separation and things like that. So although those projects fall outside of Manitou city limits, it would help both residents and tourists. And I guess that underscores the regional mission that PPRTA has. So trying to make sure that we get our share, but that we also share with others is there's a balancing act there. So I can understand that we want to watch that a little more closely. Rick.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to emphasize in point number 2, on the third line, address annual situations when the city of Manitou Springs experiences a financial deficit. So the vision there would be Lisa can develop a formula that, and this was a recommendation from one of the county commissioners. I'll leave it anonymous at that, but I think some of you who heard it will know who I'm talking about. But Lisa can, at the end of the year, can do a financial calculation, and then in the following year's mid-year budget amendment, that whatever that deficit is, let's say it's the $250,000 that it has been recently, take that off the top of the mid-year budget amendment. Well, a mid-year budget amendment is almost always additional revenue, just like the mid-year budget amendment, additional revenue that's come to the 6-member government staffs just a couple of weeks ago. Take that $250,000, for example, off the top, and that is yours, and then the rest of the member governments get their shares after the $250,000 in that example comes off the top. So that was the suggestion from one of the county commissioners. I particularly liked it, and that has not been discussed with all the board directors, because that was came up at the end of the sequence of meeting with individually with meeting all the directors. But I thought it was an excellent suggestion. So that's why the addressing the annual situations is in the proposal.
Great. Thanks, Rick. That's a good clarifying point. Julie?
Do you have any idea, time frame about when the new calculations would be voted on by your board? Like when we would know what you've decided?
I don't. Probably a shorter period of 2 to 3 months if it's capital only, because capital is a board practice. If your emphasis is maintenance, that might take a little longer, because maintenance by population is in the IGA that requires all 6-member governments, governing bodies to vote on it by a minimum 2/3 of each governing body, but it has to be every governing body by a 2/3 vote. So maintenance is a heavier lift, to use Andy's phrase, than capital. Capital would probably be 2 to 3 months to develop that formula. Maintenance might take 6 months.
And is the capital, is that the lump sum that you were referencing earlier about the $250,000 that we're losing
Yes,
every
that
year?
would come out of the board's capital reserves. So yes, that's capital.
I see.
And that's why it could easily be used for Hiawatha Gardens, because that's one of your ballot approved capital projects.
Right. And do you know if there would be any discussion or consideration as to whether future ballot initiatives would reflect the dollar amounts or an approximation of the division of funds as between the various projects that are listed? In other words, if I see that something is in Manitou is going to be listed next time round, would I know if there's going to be more than 100,000 allocated or 20,000? Or is there a way that the public could be better informed for the next go around?
We could certainly present that request to our board. It has not been the practice. It wasn't for PPRTA 1, the original ballot in November of 2004, nor the PPRTA 2, the November of 2012, nor PPRTA 3, which was this last November. So the board practice has been not to put dollar amounts in there, because that might be interpreted as a top limit, and with inflation being what it is, virtually every project is more
I see.
than an original estimate. And of course, the estimates are generated usually 2 years ahead of the ballot. And the ballot is a couple years before the 10-year cycle. So you're looking at when you get further into the 10-year capital cycle, you're 6, 8, 10, 12 years of inflation added on to whatever estimate was presented. Now, estimates are presented to our citizens committee and our board, but they just don't get on the ballot.
Would it work to get around that problem by having the ballot indicate by percentage how the monies would be allocated so that the Manitou residents knew whether any significant amount of money would be allocated for their city? Because right now they have no way of knowing. That's just a proposal. I realize you don't have authority to make a decision, but that was just.
Actually, Julie, if I might kind of explain the challenging situation it is in trying to present this. So really PPRTA has two huge lists. There's an A-list, set of A-list projects and B-list projects. A-list projects are the ones where we say in the next 10 years, we're going to get these things done. And the motto is promise made, promises kept. So when something makes the A-list, it's going to the Olympics, and the plan is to get it done. Okay, so it takes the funding priority. And then you have your B-list items. And as the A-list things get done, if there's money left over, and the planning is such that we'll be able to get to some B-list things, but there's that, it's kind of a cautionary move because, you get 8 years into a 10-year cycle. Hopefully you've got your A-list things knocked out, you're working your B, and in a perfect world, we get all our B stuff done. And maybe we'd even have, well, you never have enough left over, but we'd knock out our B list. But I think the anticipation is that some B list things just aren't going to get done. They're going to percolate up. But we try to get as much done as possible. And then the B list is, I won't say it's second string, but things of perhaps less critical importance, things that can wait a little bit, and they'll percolate up in the next go around. So the plan is to have a method where you know what your priorities are, you know what kind of money you have, you don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, because projects like our West End, if we knew what we were getting into, we might have planned it differently. And part of what we're paying on now too is to help. We're still paying off. We borrowed money from the county through I believe it was through PPRTA. We couldn't have done it without PPRTA. So all that work was done on Adams Crossing, 36th Street up. We're still paying that off, and I think of the money we get, we're paying approximately $200,000. I thought maybe it was Latin and you were saying 5, but you meant 2. Okay.
I thought we were told last time there was 600K still owed, something like that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Denise, can you clarify?
Is that what it was?
Do you remember what we owe on that, Becca? Is it 600 or 400K on that? Because we're paying, I think do you remember? 600. Okay.
600.
And we're paying
And John,
200
do
this year.
they, when we vote on the ballot, does it indicate to the public that if there's something listed for Manitou, that whether we're on the A list or the B list, so at least people kind of know if they bother?
Yeah,
to read
it
the
does. I
fine
think,
print?
our list, A list, I believe we had Serpentine Drive on there, and we didn't break that down into a whole lot of detail because Serpentine is such a challenging situation that we're pretty sure that we'll, in 10 years, the hope is to get that done and have money left over to do other things, but Serpentine
Wait, so
Drive,
Serpentine is on the A list or the B list?
it's on Manitou's A list.
The B list.
A.
Oh,
Our
A.
plan-
So when we vote, we know if we're A or
Well,
B.
yeah, I mean, and when the voters, and not just the Manitou voters, you see that long ballot. I mean, it took like almost all the backside of the ballot this last time, and it says this is what's going to happen. And so if you live in wherever, anywhere in the PPRTA, you can look and see if there's roads you recognize or roads you use. And I mean, that gives you an idea of what's happening. Of course, there may be roads that you don't use, but other people do. So, but
Well,
it's.
that's helpful. 'Cause I didn't realize that it was broken down by A and B, so at least gives people some idea whether their
Well-
project would be guaranteed
Well-
or just a maybe.
No, it does. And it has to deal with the reality because we don't know what costs are going to be. Certainly 10 years from now, it's going to be, I mean, it's a wild guess. I mean, and just our experience in the last year, last summer, the CDOT guys were constantly relaying information. The bids were coming in a lot higher than what they'd expected. So some things got canceled. There was work up on Highway 24 west of Divide that got tabled for, just that was on a previous list. And actually that was outside of the PPRT area. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have used it, except the point on that was that the costs had just jumped up. I think they were saying the costs had gone up 30% over what they had anticipated. So it just kind of tells you what a vexing situation is and how difficult it is to make a hard forecast. Denise?
Mayor, I have the last ballot one, and then I had the one 10 years ago, and then the current one, and you can get on the city's city clerk, and they have the ballot right there, verbiage, exactly what's on the A list and the B list. So you can look there. But if you want to look at this, I just need it back because it's for my files. But it shows exactly was on the A list and the
Okay.
B list for 10 years ago that finishes in 2024, and then the ones that start in 2025. So
Okay.
you can just take a
Yeah,
quick look
maybe
at
just
that.
pass that around.
But it's also on the city clerk's website,
Okay.
so you can look at it and it
Good.
shows exactly what it is.
Does that help, Julie?
Your answer helped. I don't need the list. I just wanted to know
Okay, great.
what I asked you.
Okay. Do you have other comments or questions from council? If not, I guess I'd just like to go around the table and kind of take the temperature and see where we stand with this. When we started with Julie?
No, I'd like to go last. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start on this side. Michelle?
I'm good.
You're good. I can go down and ask for 600,000.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, excuse me, that we're pleased and at the offer with the letter, we're in concert with that is what I take that to mean. Okay, great. Thanks. Judith?
I support the recommendation of $600,000 with the caveat of regular follow-ups and visits. And I appreciate you articulating the three issues in the plan to us and look forward to future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Yeah, I support what has been proposed for you to go back and take it tomorrow. Thanks.
Good. And I support it and I appreciate the work that you've done on it. Thank you very much. And also Denise and Nancy, you did a lot of work. Appreciate it. John? Okay, can you?
I'm fine with all the comments.
Great, thank you. Natalie?
I also support where we are.
Okay, good. Julie?
Okay, yes, and I will go along with it. And I also want to say thank you for trying to work it out for us.
Okay, great. I think council has direction. Andy, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, just a final comment. Just thank you very much for the conversation, Mary. This has been a difficult, exercise trying to go through this, trying to figure out how to make this work. It's a regional program, but trying to make sure that there's local equity as well. That's definitely on our minds. And hearing this conversation definitely helps. And I've had this conversation with Denise. We have these same conversations at the state level and even at the federal level, to be honest with you, arguing with CDOT over what we should bring back to the Pikes Peak region. And the same thing with USDOT on what we should get back as our fair share in Colorado. It's a little bit harder at the regional metropolitan level because we all travel across the region. But we heard you loud and clear. And I think with the recommendations that were in the proposal that the board will talk about tomorrow, one of them is to try to put the CAC to work under Jim's leadership and see if there's some ways to look at the revenue sharing. And as Denise and I have talked about as well, it's been 18 years since we put the program in place. So having a regular check-in to see how things are working, that's a healthy exercise. So I appreciate the conversation.
We do also. Thank you very much. And we appreciate the work you put into it. And Jim, it looks like you're going to get more work. So in advance, we'll say thanks. Okay, I think we're good. Very good. I'll be at the meeting tomorrow and I will endorse Rick's letter. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all coming out. We got the sun to come out now, so the drive home will be a little less vexing. Okay, the next item. We'll take a minute here. Okay, our next item is an e-bike voucher pilot program discussion. And-
Mayor, may I go ahead and do the introduction?
Yeah, please do so.
Great, thank you. So this program is coming forward because at the February meeting, when we met for a day, one of the directions I took away from council and I ended with is to come back with an e-bike voucher program. So today, Councilor Chandler Joan Stang, Kevin, and Alex and Nicole have all been working on this program for the last couple of months. And they'll be presenting the program to you as one of the things that you, or one of the items you asked me to do at the February meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to them.
Okay, thank you.
May I make a comment of
So,
introduction?
yeah, go ahead, Judith.
Thank you. So I've been wanting to bring an e-bike incentive program to Manitou after the Denver program was launched. I was so excited to see how popular that program was and was thrilled to see that the data that was coming out of that program was really encouraging with regards to e-bike usage and decreasing combustion engine vehicle use and also decreasing our carbon footprint. So I had in my notes that we, at the council budget retreat, it was October 1st, 2022, I brought up the idea of a placeholder for some funding to bring a program forward. And so grateful that we have so much local talent. I just wanted to really quickly give kudos to the village who helped put this together. Joan Stang, to whom this program, this presentation would not be possible. She's the education chair of Bike Colorado and Pac-Man. She also serves on COG and is helping us at the Manitou Springs Elementary School with the safe rides to school and is a volunteer crossing guard. Alex Treffry, our PIO, Kevin Stevenson, parking manager, who couldn't be here tonight because he is at a conference. Nicole Ortega, our finance supervisor. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Jared Thompson, who we reached out to, who sent us a draft logo, and we all got to look at all of the drafts, and the group they got to pick and choose, and I think that put together a really awesome logo. And lastly, Michael Salisbury, he is the director of the County and City of Denver e-bike voucher program, and he's the transportation energy lead of the City of Denver, amongst other things. And he was gracious enough to meet with us, Joan and I, via Zoom on April 12th, and walk us and talk us through how we might use the Denver program as a template for what we could do in our small city. And I do remember two things that he said, and I just want to pass these pearls along to you, because a lot's changed since last year and last fall, and now a lot of communities are jumping on board. This program has become a national and international program that communities are adopting. I asked him, what is the number one problem that you see us facing? And he said, the number one problem I see you facing is your program is going to be so popular, you're going to have that problem. And I look forward to hopefully having that problem. But the other thing he said was they've been reaching out to other communities. And mind you, this was April and other communities have come on board. He said, you will be the smallest community to adopt some kind of incentive program. So he thought that he was really thrilled about that. And lastly, also Carl Stang is with us. He's definitely a bike safety and cycling expert, is on Pac-Man and member of the Mobility and Parking Board. We'd like to present the slides to you. And if you wouldn't mind holding your questions and comments, if you have them till the end. We did get some questions already from at least one council member that we worked on making sure that we had adequate answers today. So with that, I will turn it over to the team. Thank you.
Good evening, Carl Stang. If you don't mind, I'll present, and Joan will provide color commentary as we go through the slide deck.
Okay. And Carl, we always ask for an address, so if you'll
Yep.
add that to.
Yeah, 204 Crystal Park Road.
Okay, great. Thanks. Go ahead.
All right, first slide, please. So not a major news flash to anybody in the room, but Manitou Springs has a congestion problem. And so, hey, why offer an e-bike voucher program? So the ability to replace car trips with bike trips is a major step towards reducing vehicular congestion. People, waiting in line at the stoplight ahead of you, people competing for parking spaces. And so, being able to replace those trips with bike trips is really important. And so we really wanting to emphasize, that we envision this as people using these e-bikes for transportation, so not just fitness and recreation. And obviously, reducing those number of car trips has a positive impact on vehicle emissions, and as well as the mental and physical benefits, right? When I ride my bike, it puts a smile on my face, right? And so we hope that people signing up for these vouchers have a similar experience.
Joan Stang, 204 Crystal Park Road. I just wanted to add a comment in regards to why getting people out of their cars and on e-bikes is such a awesome climate action type of tool. And that is a statistic from the US Department of Energy in 2017, nearly 60% of household vehicle trips were just 6 miles or less, and 75% were 10 miles or less. Just imagine if we could get more people using a bike to get around, to run those short car trips, you replace those car trips, those shorter ones. Wouldn't that be awesome? Can you imagine the impact we would have as far as traffic mitigation, congestion mitigation, and positive impact on our environment?
Thank you. Next slide, please. So reiterating, we believe that bikes are a great tool for reducing climate action, reducing traffic congestion. And, hey, here's an opportunity to show why Manitou Springs is special, right? Well, like Judith mentioned, we could be the first small town to sign up for an e-bike rebate program. And, obviously this supports things that, values that we have put in Plan Manitou, the transportation mobility master plan, trying to support multi-mobility. And so, this weaves in with that very well. And finally, getting people out of their vehicles, allows for people to have interactions, positive interactions, get to know your neighbor, right? So fostering that relationship and making Manitou feel more like a community is a positive side benefit as well. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide just has some highlights from the Denver e-bike program highlights. So Denver, they issued 5,500 vouchers for e-bikes, and those sold out, if you will, within minutes, right? Extremely popular. The expectation and hope is for Manitou that we would experience something very similar. You talk about trying to get public input on multi-mobility, having an e-bike voucher program that sells out in minutes is going to tell you that Manitou Springs supports multimodal transportation, right? If we move forward with this. Denver engaged the Rocky Mountain Institute to do an analysis of the benefits. They calculated 1 million in cumulative annual savings. So that's, the cost of fuel for people that would normally buy fuel for driving or, charging their electric vehicle, as well as the, 0.94 pounds of CO2 savings per dollar spent, right? So that's over 2,000 metric tons of avoided emissions per year. So, hey, a benefit for all of us in a small mountain valley community. And finally, they highlighted, because they did a data collection. So 65% of those 5,500 residents rode their e-bike at least once daily. So replacing a car trip once per day. 90% were replacing car trips weekly. So that adds up over time, right?
Thanks, Carl. Just to add as well, the Denver e-bike program is actually being used as a national template. The League of American Bicyclists back in March actually invited Mike Salisbury and one of the bike shops that participated, that was Mackenzie Hart with Hart Family Cyclery in Denver. They actually were part of a workshop that was offered during the League's National Bike Summit in March, and that was held in Washington, D.C., both in person and virtually. And it's being used as a template for the nation, basically, for all of the U.S. So just note that. And by the way, they had participants there that were actually present from other countries.
Cool. Next slide, please. All right, so just continuing on the Denver e-bike program, their data collection, nearly 30% of the participants were new or claimed that they were new to riding. So that's, I think, a really great introduction and expanding that population that is using e-bikes for transportation. 71% said hey, they saved gas, using their gas vehicles less. And Denver, they set up their program targeting income qualified residents. So 67% of their program that got vouchers were income qualified residents. And then just the other statistics, right? Their average trip length, 3.3 miles, 84% less than 5 miles, 65% less than 3 miles. So going back to, the statistics that Joan led with earlier, in Denver, they were able to replace a lot of those short trips with e-bike use. So great use of that. And I think, the last point, they're just trying to point out that they believe the e-bike voucher had spillover benefits to their bike share, as well as they have scooter share. So people riding bikes were more receptive to it and used the bike share at the highest recorded levels in 2018.
I also wanted to add a little story, a couple of quotes from some of their e-bike participants that were part of their voucher program. And one of the quotes was, "Hey, I ride the bike all the way to work now. I actually ride the bike all the way home as well. It's better. I get home faster." This person actually must have taken the bus, but he said it used to take almost 2 hours to get home, and now it takes only 35 minutes on the e-bike. Another participant mentioned, "Hey, I lost 70 pounds since receiving my e-bike," and they're just ecstatic about it. So there are health benefits, obviously, all the way around.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, so what would the Manitou e-bike voucher program look like? So we're proposing an online application process. So using the existing, I believe it's the residential parking permit platform for residency requirements. We selected 5 shops where you could go redeem your voucher. And I point out that 2 of the 5 are Manitou bike shops. So 100% participation in Manitou bike shops in the voucher program. And it would involve bike shop reimbursement, as well as some safety recommendations, infrastructure and budget, which we'll touch on in subsequent slides. All right, so the proposal is for 125 vouchers, $500 each, with no income requirement. And so this first phase is a pilot, right? So we want to start simple. And so, trying to make the requirements very straightforward for the pilot. 1 per household, minimum 16 years old, proof of 1 year of residency as a Manitou resident. And out of that, they would get a digital code that they could provide to one of the 5 bike shops. And we're going to require that the people that sign up for this program provide some data collection, and as well as there's going to be some educational recommendations as well. Obviously, there will be a waiver, legal waiver with the city, and the city will take 10 days to process any applications, and recipients must use the voucher within, I believe it's 60 days. All right, so here's the list of the bike shops. So the first 2 are in Manitou. So e-bike sales and rentals in Manitou, and Incline e-bikes up on Ruxton, as well as the Colorado Springs Bike Shop, Old Town, and Angle Tech. Notice that these are all within 7.8 miles. They're kind of more west side type bike shops. And Angle Tech is on there because they offer the additional, what's the term? Adaptive cycling. Thank you. And they're also a participant in the Denver e-bike rebate program because of that adaptive cycling component.
So as Carl said, not only did we want to hand select bike shops that are close to Manitou, we wanted to keep the program simple. Denver opened this up to, right now on the list, there's 32 bike shops, And I actually had a chat with Mackenzie Hart, who owned one of the bike shops that participated. I mentioned this earlier, Hart Family Cyclery. And he actually said, you know, a lot of people don't know this, but literally 90% of the folks who applied for this voucher in Denver, they all, well, not all of them, but 90% of them ran to Rad Power Bikes, who really truly didn't have a brick and mortar store set up. What they did was they basically rented some space, office space, allowed these folks, these customers to come in with their vouchers to order their bike and to take receipt of the bike. However, they were not full service bike shops. They didn't assemble the bikes. I was told they didn't even offer a proper fit, nor did they service the bikes once their customers, you know, got their bikes and started using them. So he was very concerned about that. That was a comment he had made that was like, I'm so glad that Manitou has decided to limit this to only 5 bike shops that are truly full service bike shops and that offer awesome customer service. Thanks.
Okay, so from the bike shop perspective, obviously they're going to sign a contract with the city, and the agreement is as follows, right? So the voucher is for class 1 to 3 e-bikes only. So no mountain bikes, no retrofit kits. So a lot of retrofit kits are very high wattage, 750 watts and above. And so the class 1 to 3 is the federally approved e-bike range. So class 1 is up to 20 miles an hour pedal assist. Class 2 is the 20 mile an hour throttle assist, and class 3 is the 20 mile an hour pedal assist. The voucher can only cover the cost of the bike, so it can't be applied towards taxes or accessories. Although obviously the shops will probably provide some sort of an additional discount or incentives to try and drive additional sales with that purchase for helmet, locks, or lights.
In fact, we've already had one local bike shop, Gregory Cobble, that is, who owns e-bike sales and rental of Manitou. He's mentioned, hey, I'd be willing to offer a deeper discount for accessories such as a helmet, lock, and lights.
May I just make a quick comment also, that this voucher does not have to be used on a brand new bike. We did allow for someone to buy a refurbished bike, if that is in their income bracket, and that is different from the Senate Bill 22-193, which requires that you must buy only a brand new bike with your voucher. Thank you.
Great clarification. Thank you. All right, next slide. All right, so the reimbursement process is, customers must take possession of the bike, right? They can't just order it. They actually have the bike in stock and take possession of it. Bike must be paid in full. And so the shop is going to enter the e-bike voucher number, the serial number from the bike, and upload the receipt. And so then the finance department has 15 business days to issue that refund to that shop for that submission.
Just a clarification, a customer can actually walk into one of the 5 participating bike shops and actually order the bike they want. So I just wanted to make that clear. They can buy a bike that's already assembled and on the floor, or they can order an e-bike of their choice. For instance, what if somebody wants a cargo e-bike and they walk into Ingletech and they don't have the Urban Arrow, for instance, available? They can certainly order it and use the voucher for that. Just making that clarification.
Correct, but the voucher reimbursement wouldn't happen until they actually had receipt of that order. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Okay, next slide. All right, so the data sharing requirement that we're proposing is that the folks that redeem these vouchers would fill out an online survey 3 times. So trying to collect odometer readings every 2 months for 6 months. And so, the whole goal here is to have data to prove, hopefully that this is successful, that they're actually using the bikes, we're getting that return on investment. And so that's part of the requirements for participation. And just listing, we're willing to assist with that data collection, right? To try and take some work off of staff, right? And assist staff. So Joan, myself and Judith, and then as well, Alex. And then we'll come back to council with a summary of that data that we've collected. So e-bikes being a bit more expensive than your standard bike. There's some concerns about where people could park them. And so part of the proposal is an infrastructure piece for bike lockers. So a secure bike storage. And so we looked at these DuraCore lockers. They're Bluetooth. I believe it could be integrated with the parking department software they have already. And we're suggesting a rental cost of $1 per hour to defray the cost of the lockers. Obviously, there's been discussion already of potentially having bike lockers at the Hiawatha Gardens Mobility Hub, as well as at Soda Springs Park. And, these, they can be stacked. And so, you can reduce the footprint and have a greater number of parking spaces, if you will, by stacking these versus taking up a larger footprint. And so this particular model that we're looking at, it can either be secured with a concrete pad, or I believe there's an alternative to stake it to the ground, which would maybe give advantages in case we wanted to move it at a later date. Okay, so in the safety recommendation category, so initially we had actually discussed, just a little background, we had discussed maybe making it a requirement that folks signing up for the e-bike voucher, that they would take training. I believe Alex took some of the classes and there was some concerns about ADA compliance. Yeah, thank you. And so we backed off. And so it's more recommendation, right? So if someone's new, hey, I want to understand, how to be a bicycle friendly driver. We have online training from the League of American Bicyclists around bike friendly driver, as well as smart cycling. So kind of a cycling 101. And then obviously, we'll make strong recommendations that folks using these e-bikes, wear a helmet, have a locked, so they can secure their bikes. And as well that they register them with like a service or an app like 529 Garage. So it's a open source app that you can install. You basically enter information about your bike, the serial number, you take a picture. And so it kind of gives you a way to kind of have record of your bike. And then if it gets stolen, you can report that. And then it kind of crowdsources the tracking down of your bicycle. And so a nice little app for that purpose. And then obviously, we'll recommend the use of a white headlight and red taillight if folks can be riding after dark, right? Colorado law requires the use of lights for bicyclists. So we'll make that recommendation as well. And I will point out, a lot of e-bikes have headlights and taillights built in, right? You have a battery. And so that's almost, comes with a lot of the bikes automatically. All right, so budget, we have $100,000 budget. So 125 vouchers at 500 each, plus bike lockers and other miscellaneous totaling $100,000. And I'll defer additional budget questions to Becca. And if we can go to the next slide. Switch to the question point. So questions.
Council, any questions? Comments? Okay, I guess I do. So I guess I'll start off. So when I was looking through the materials yesterday, it got me curious. We do have a relationship with Pike Ride, and they were in here a couple of months ago, and we allocated $75,000 to Pike Ride. Part of that was for a couple of basically stations or concrete plus pads to have stations where people can get bikes or leave bikes. And then we also, that included $35,000 to help them pay their administrative costs over the year. And at that time I looked and we had their pilot program, they had 650 trips in Manitou. That was a different year than when we were kicking in the $75,000, which is this year. But if you use those numbers for math, which is what I had, that gave us a cost of about $115 per ride with Pike Ride. And it seems to me like that is not moving towards success. So my thought was, could we do something that would also help Pike Ride as well as make bicycles available? Because another aspect as I look at this, you know, for the city to basically give somebody $500, you know, I question that. I feel like we're trying to be Santa Claus. I do think it's in the city's purview to try and make cycling safe in the community, but giving somebody $500 to buy a bike is, I mean, should we give other people $500 to buy gasoline or to, you know, to do whatever? It's I have a philosophical problem with that. Now, what I did, and in doing a little bit of research yesterday, I found out that Pike Ride has a leasing program, and it's geared largely for low-income individuals, be $25 a month. And I just found out if it's fairly new, the people get to use it's a Pike Ride bike. They don't buy it, they don't own it, but they get to take it to work. They get to take it home. They don't have to return it to a Pike Ride facility. They get a charger. And if they have mechanical problems, it goes back to Pike Ride and Pike Ride fixes it. And the argument there was, particularly with low-income people, if you have an expensive fix and you're in a marginal situation, you may not be able to get the bike repaired, but this would ensure that the bike could be maintained and functioning for, you know, for individuals. So to me, that seems like another alternative. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look into that, or it's a new program. I actually had to call somebody up and talk to them a little bit because the website doesn't have, it has a fair amount of information, but not as much. Carl?
So you're talking about the Pike Ride Plus program. And so that is a new program and a great program. But I believe there's a limit. And as I recall, it was only 50 bikes. And so it's not going to be very exhaustive as far as the audience that they're going to impact.
I understand. Yeah. And actually a conversation I had with their new executive director yesterday. And also the low income part would only apply really to a portion of Manitou. It would basically equate to, I think it's Ward 1, give you an idea of the geographical territory. But they did say they'd be open to discussion. So it sounds like if Manitou wanted to talk to Pike Ride about this, maybe we could customize it to make it available to more residents. And if there was demand to get more bicycles, they didn't say no. They said, call us back and let's talk.
May I address?
Sure. Yeah.
Comments, which I think are very valid. I think that you've brought up some interesting talking points. One of the biggest rationales for putting this forward is the results of the last two community surveys over the last 2 years. We don't have the data from this year's survey because it's still open. And if you haven't taken it, I hope you do. But clearly, and I would be surprised if this survey doesn't still have the number one problem that residents are worried about, and that is traffic, parking, congestion, and we are also worried about the environmental impacts of internal combustion engine vehicles. So a couple things. First of all, I have the Pike Ride information. It is a 50 bike leasing program. It's on a rotating basis. I think it's great. My personal opinion is anything that gets butts on bikes and gets people out of cars is a good thing. But the rationale for actually incentivizing someone to purchase a bike comes from the data from the 2022 Denver e-bike program that showed that these programs shows that these are for generally a tourist application, someone who's coming into town, a very quick ride. But it's not changing the type of behavior that we want to change. And so what we wanted to do was introduce a resident-centric solution to a community-based problem and show the residents that we really are listening to you, and we're reading the community surveys, and we're seeing that we have a really terrible problem. We do. So that's kind of some of the rationale of choosing the voucher program over relying on, these types of lease programs. I will say something also about the lockers. And originally when we came together, we talked about the possibility of more bike, just putting more bike stands up. And we realized, well, concrete, that's not where we want to go environmentally. So we started looking at other communities that were using these Bluetooth enabled bike lockers. And you don't have to have an e-bike to use it. You can use this bike locker for a regular traditional bike. We suggested, if this program were to go forward, a dollar an hour cost to rent the lockers as a way of incentivizing the continuation of the program. And also, this is the future of communities. People want to have bike lockers. They want bike lockers more than they want just a bike rack. So that's why we included that. We do understand that there is probably going to be some discussion about where the funding could come from for those lockers, but we at least wanted to introduce an infrastructure piece so that we weren't neglecting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Not sure who was first. It's Nancy and then Julie.
Yeah, thank you. You guys have clearly put a whole lot of work into this, and about a month ago, I would have been very supportive of this in theory. I think obviously it still needs some more tweaks, but given what's happened recently with both the Pike Ride program and the state law that was just passed, I think we need to take another look at if and how this is implemented. I've got much more comments, but if you've got a question, go ahead.
I just wanted to touch on the state e-bike rebate. So that is, they're going to, I believe they're passing that, and they're going to offer a budget. And so cities, municipalities can sign up for that, but it has a long laundry list of requirements, and it's going to be much more involved and time intensive. And so I don't think that's kind of a slam dunk. And so I view a local e-bike voucher
Right.
program.
The application the application process is already online for it. So it's passed, and it's the Department of Energy is supporting it.
Right.
The rebate is much larger than what you're proposing. And obviously there's 4.5 million people over the age of 18 in Colorado. I don't know how many of them are low income or moderate income, but they're currently expecting to give about 1,000 vouchers a month. But my proposal would be that we look at different ways that we might take advantage of these programs, particularly the Pike Ride, as the mayor has suggested, because I think there's a lot of potential there. And I agree, I would at this point really like to get that Pike Ride very healthy in Manitou, and it currently is not. And I think the lease program, we talk about actually purchasing the bike, but if the leasing bike, you'll have it at home with you with the charger. And I would rather invest in that and build that program up. So I think it's almost the same, leasing versus ownership. Go ahead, Carla. I've got some more things, but go ahead.
May I just clarify? Are you talking about Senate Bill 22-193? Is that what you're referring to?
I don't know the Senate bill. I went to the Department of Energy website and read their implementation instructions for the e-bike voucher program in Colorado.
Because I would like to address that after your
Okay,
comments, Carl.
Judith, I think Carl wanted to finish up and then Julie, and then we'll come back to you. So Carl, if you could respond there.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, in my mind, I view kind of Pike Ride Plus, and I think the Colorado e-bike rebate and our proposed Manitou e-bike rebate is really targeting different audiences. The Pike Ride Plus is targeted towards
I'm
Southeast.
talking about the lease
Colorado.
program. I don't
Yes.
think they're calling that Pike Ride Plus, are they?
It is, it's called.
I thought
Bike
that
Ride
was a different
Plus.
program. Okay.
Yeah, so, but the lease program is targeting Southeast Colorado Springs specifically and targeting low income individuals. And, you know, I believe the state program is as well. I don't think a lot of Manitou residents would qualify for that. And so but yet there's kind of that middle ground where I think there's people that, hey, maybe I could go down to, instead of 2 cars, go down to 1 car if I had an e-bike. And, you know, so I think it's kind of a different audience for the Manitou e-bike.
And I would certainly agree with that. Both of them are looking at, well, the state program is looking at either low income or moderate income. So moderate income is over $100,000. So it's not insignificant. And then it's tiered for what the rebates will be. But you're proposing $100,000 budget, which is a significant amount. And I think that the timing may not be right at this point to implement the program as you currently proposed it. I think we need to look at these other programs to see how they could be implemented in Manitou. And I've got some ideas on that now, but I will stop so that Julie can talk.
Yeah. Okay, Julie. We'll get back to you eventually, Carl. Okay, Julie.
I don't know if this question can be answered tonight, but I would just want more information about the programs that you were talking about, Mayor. Judith said something about the Pike Ride Plus being some kind of a 30-day rolling thing. Does that mean if I qualified, I would only be able to rent the bike for a month and then I'd have to turn it in and give it to someone else? Or how do you know? Can you tell us more how that would work or how that does work? Oh.
I guess we've got an information sheet there that you can look over.
Well, I'm not going to sit here while all 7 of us reads a page with single space writing. So maybe that's an issue for another day, but I'd like to know that because if in fact this is only limited to 50 people, that's not going to help us. If there's a way that we can spend that same 100,000 and we're able to lease more bikes, then, you know, what we could do if we're giving a voucher for the purchase of bikes, I'd be interested to look at that. But I really support the budget amount that we've set aside to get more bikes and fewer cars on the road, especially like Carl said, I could really imagine some families deciding to go with just one vehicle and then the e-bike as opposed to each having their own car. So I'd be real interested though in looking at statistics to see if it is in fact a better use of our money to lease the vehicles for people to use in Manitou as opposed to for them to buy without there being necessarily an income. I mean, maybe there could be some upper income limit, but I'd just like to see more bikes on the road, whether it's from moderate income or not.
Okay, thank you. Judith, your turn.
Yes, so to both of those points, I just want to make sure that the council is very clear on what these programs, including the state bill and the Pike Ride Plus offer. The Pike Ride Plus is new. It is just recently rolled out. We've been working on this e-bike voucher for a while, and it kind of, rolled out real recently. And I think it's a great idea. It's a lease for, max of 50 people. And I do believe there's a time limit. It's $25 a month for the bike and the accessories. And so I don't know if it's actually even been implemented yet. But I do know that Colorado Springs is planning on working with Pike Ride to utilize this. I do want to very much want to speak to Senate Bill 22-1932, to which Mayor Pro Tem Fortune is referring to. Yes, you can apply online. However, the state program provides basically a grant. I have the text of the bill here. And what it does is it provides grants and there is a matching component, although in the bill, it does not state a percentage of match. I don't know if it's 50-50, but there's a matching component. And what happens is if we as a community want to participate in that, we apply, let the state know, and we receive funds to which we have some match. And then it is upon us as a community to 100% administer the entire program, including rolling it out, verifying income, gathering data. There is a periodic reporting requirement, and the language of the bill specifically states, and I'll quote this, local governments, tribal governments or nonprofit organizations awarded money under the grant program may use the money to purchase and maintain electric bicycles, equipment, and infrastructure for its own bike share program. So we can use, if we were to do this program, we could use it as a bike share or a bike purchase or a combination of the two, or ownership, and pay labor costs related to implementation of the program and cover the direct and indirect administrative costs that the local government or third party incurs implementing the program. So we would have to, it would be our staff infrastructure putting in place. The other thing that I want you to be very, very cognizant of is if we were to do something like that, there's two classes of folks that would qualify: low income, which is 80% AMI, and medium to low, which is 80 to 100% of.
Can you tell us what that is? Do you know in dollars?
It's area median income.
No, dollar amount. Is that
The
under
dollar-
70 grand, over 70?
The
Do you know what
bill
that-
does not specifically state a dollar amount. And I think that's for a reason. This bill, it's by county. AMI is by county. And AMI stands for area mean income. But I think what you were asking was, what is the amount of the grant that you receive? I believe that each local government can say, we need X amount of money and here's our match. I don't know how that part of it works, but unlike our program, you must buy a new bike. You must be 18 years of age or over. We are recommending 16, because if you can drive a car, we would rather have you riding your bike up to the high school, right? With a low income, you get several different vouchers. You get a voucher for the bike, you get a equipment incentive, you get an e-cargo bike edition, and you get what they're calling adaptive e-bike incentives. So there's an up to 4 different piles of money. So a low income person can get a total of that $1,750 under the state program. Same thing, a middle income is 1,150. But again, you'd have to have the staff infrastructure to manage the whole program. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing or something we shouldn't look into. I'm just saying we have to, look at it with a realistic viewpoint of can our small town absorb that kind of, staff time and infrastructure it would take to run a full-time program. Thank you.
Nancy?
I would just like to, because as I read the actual implementation instructions, not just the law, I think that there are 2 avenues. One, individuals can apply to the state for the rebate, or a city can apply for a grant. So I think that there's 2 programs that are outlined, or that there's actually implementation instructions for. So I'm not saying that I am advocating for any of these, your program, that program, Pike Ride. I just think that there's a lot of options out there that we should be looking at, and it might be a hybrid of all 3. But I think that this program, as you presented, needs more, given the timing. Again, if this had come to us, 6 months, a year early, I probably would have had a different opinion. But given the timing of it and the things that are the multiple other things that are now available, I would just like to look into those other things before we go forward with this. That's all. I'm very, very interested, as you might imagine, in having some sort of rebate for e-bikes in our city.
Carl, do you want to respond? Or?
I just had 2 kind of clarifications I wanted to make to previous comments. So I just wanted, Mayor, to your comments about the Pike Ride data. And I just wanted to point out that, the Pike Ride implementation initial rollout was not ideal, right? The stations were, instead of being located, where they're visible from the roadway, they were set back, so it's kind of like trying to expect people to ride the bus, and the bus stop is around the corner and down the block. And then also we moved it a couple times. And so I think that impacted some of the uptake on the Pike Ride ridership. And then as well, I just wanted to mention, you're mentioning the budget. We're looking at Hiawatha Gardens as a mobility hub and all the parking spaces there. And I don't have like the super precise figures, but my understanding is a parking space costs at minimum $10,000, right? It's a parking garage, it gets even more. And so for the price of 10 parking spaces, we're going to have 125 e-bikes out there that won't be competing for parking and competing for space on the roadway. So it feels like a fairly decent trade-off for that investment of dollars. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, boy, we got all kinds of hands over here. Let's see, I'm going to just go around on my left. So we'll do John, then Natalie, then Denise.
Just for people who are maybe listening on the record and didn't look in the materials, what's your estimate in terms of how many unique individuals in Manitou as the program that you're depicting would be able to? You have an estimate in terms of the number of people number of individuals who could get a bike using your program?
So the voucher is 125 vouchers and it's one per household. So 125 different households would have, in theory, access to an e-bike.
Okay, so, all right, so so essentially, because it's a household kind of thing, that's really the unique number of individuals, right? Okay, just to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Natalie?
I sent this question to you all earlier, but I'm just kind of curious about, we've been working really hard to improve safety on our roads for bicyclists, but it's pretty rough out there. And so I know for myself, personally getting from my house to Safeway would be, it'd be scary. And so I'm just kind of thinking about timing as well. And, I know we're working on Creek Walk phases 4 and 5, which would offer protected bike lanes for folks. I'm just kind of wondering about those pieces. So I know that, that we could potentially offer 125 e-bikes to folks, but I'm just wondering if there's 125 people that are willing to risk their lives on the road right now. So that's kind of my concern.
Okay, thank you. And we got Denise next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I sent all of council a quick email regarding Pike Ride because it is launching in July and it talks about that it's launching in 3 phases. So the first phase is 80916 and that's going first. And then phase 2 will be larger Southeast Colorado Springs. And then the final phase will be all of Colorado Springs. So I sent that to you and highlighted it. So you can see how Pike Ride is starting their program. And right now it looks like Manitou is not included, but Mayor, it sounds like you talked to them and they would be willing to talk to us about it.
Yes, if I might respond to that. I did talk to them yesterday and they did mention the thing about phasing things in. They said they'd really gotten more participation down the southeast part of Colorado Springs thing. We're going to start there. And I think they were talking August, possibly September, that they would come into Western Colorado Springs and Manitou. I mean, and we're kicking into their administrative payments and on their website, I mean, say Colorado Springs and Manitou Springs. So we're included in that. Now, the low income area is basically it aligns with Ward 1. They said they do update their maps fairly often. So and that they were willing to talk about things. And I asked them about the 50 bike limit and they said, well, that's their starting place, but it sounded like they'd be willing to talk about that so that we could at least entertain the idea that they would customize some things for Manitou. Now a couple things that are significant. They would do the administration. So I don't see that we would need to add city staff or that we would impact city staff. They would do the maintenance. So in the case of the person who leases the bike, they would have recourse to getting the bike maintained, fixed, which is particularly important to low income people. They have GPS, so they can track. They track where the bikes are, so they could actually provide data on how often the bikes are used, what the routes are that the cyclists use. So I think that would be, for kind of a test or an initial case, we would get some good information back as to how people were, are using the bikes. And if it just sits in somebody's closet for the most part, and they use it once a month, we'd know that as well. In Pike Ride, they just recently got a new executive director. So I was talking to her along with the fellow that was the interim director. And it seemed like they would be open to having a discussion with us and possible collaboration. Yeah, I guess in it's a phased approach. I think they have 3 full-time people, so it's not like they've got a huge staff to go out and try to conquer the world all at once, hence the phased approach. And I guess my other point in this is that it's the Pike Ride system is it's geared towards low-income people. I think we might have the ability to customize a lease program for a higher dollar amount for non-low income people. If we go with the voucher program, there's no means testing, so anybody would be able to get a bike. But is that really the business of government to give somebody $500 to buy a bike if they can afford it? And if we give somebody $500 for a bike, should we give somebody else $500 for a wheelchair if they need it? So I get pretty uneasy about that part of using the public money for sort of, Christmas presents, as it were. Judith, Michelle, it was kind of a tie. You haven't spoken, so why don't you go ahead, Michelle, and then.
I think this would be a great program. I do have a question on the contingency, the $5,100. Could you please explain that?
Yeah, so just because we don't know the exact cost of what everything's gonna be, I mean, we know how much the vouchers are gonna be, but in terms of the bike lockers, postcards, mailings, everything that's in that budget line, we don't know the exact cost. So that's just a contingency, just to be safe, to make sure that we're budgeting for the maximum that it could cost as opposed to what we think it will be. So that's all it is. You're welcome.
Judith?
Yes, and if I could just further address the budget. So we just got a presentation and a dangle of $600,000 from PPRTA to put a salve on the red ink that we've been bleeding for the last several years. And so we could have a discussion if this council was interested in taking a look at, since Hiawatha Gardens is a mobility hub plan, and there's already been a discussion, I know, in some of the community engagement meetings about having bike repair stations, bike lockers, and other amenities there, that there's we could have a conversation of Hiawatha Gardens or that fund the $30,000 for the bike lockers. So that would reduce our ask to $70,000. The reason why we went with locker decals, these lockers come in a lot of different colors. We thought about engaging the art community and having, an artist contest to wrap the lockers. But we felt like at this point, stickers are very popular, that we would put a decal on each locker with the logo, and that the stickers would be for people to put on their water bottles and their helmets and their bike and to further to promote the program. We also felt that we came up with a slogan, Cycle City. And as of today, I did check with the Secretary of State website. That is still a name that's available to trademark. And we came up with that because our intention is to really promote Manitou as a safe cycling destination where you are welcome here to ride your bike, not necessarily just on a creek walk trail, but on a safe street, because we've made it so. And that has been a vision and a mission of ours to make it so. And so, so that we attract the kind of visitor we want to attract. We keep talking about it. And how we're going to solve all these problems. And I feel like we keep kicking the can down the road and we don't come up with any proposals with teeth on them. And that's a frustration of mine. So this voucher program checked a lot of boxes, the environmental box, putting residents over tourists. I think that it'll be really interesting to see what that survey question pans out to be on this survey. I think there's a lot of residents that still feel that this is, that they get the short end of the deal with regards to, you know, parking and traffic. Also stimulate the business community. These cyclists that come would bring in, you know, their money and spend their dollars. So to me, it checks a lot of boxes and it really enhances what I hope my vision is for my town. If we're going to be a health and wellness destination, then let's start acting like one. So I think that I think that $30,000 is on the table to negotiate.
Nancy, you're next.
Oh, yeah, again, I just want to reiterate that I want an e-bike voucher program. I just want to use all the tools that are on the table, and I don't think this program does that at this point in time. And secondly, I was just wondering if on your last slide, you couldn't find a picture of our mayor. It's Mayor Southers on your last slide. Where are you? Is that you?
I'm disguised.
Oh, I didn't recognize them. I could see Mayor Southers in the center and I totally did not recognize.
That's from the
John.
dual mayor's ride last year. So we had John and John
Yeah.
dueling at Adams Crossing.
If Mayor Southers were here, he would just be rolling. He would be having a good time. Well,
Just
thank
most
you.
of these slides, if not all of them, were our Manitou residents, including 3 generations of my family. So
I'm sorry, the couple of hands over here. Natalie and then Julie.
I'm just wondering if it's possible to launch with fewer bikes as well. I mean, I know you guys made the suggestion of the 150. Is it possible to launch with fewer, or is there a mathematical reason that you picked that number?
the answer is there's a reason for that amount. Mike Salisbury kind of helped us with this question. You don't want to have too few bikes because you put it out there and people go, oh, only 50. I'm never going to get one. I'm not going to apply. We really want this program to work. We want people on bikes, riding their bikes, making fewer trips so we actually really make an impactful change in this town. The other thing that we looked at is how many vouchers do we need to really collect a robust enough amount of data to bring back and say, wow, hopefully that would be a wow. Or no, I mean, we didn't hit the mark. So that's, that wasn't just pie in the sky number. The only reason we didn't introduce a income requirement at the time, which we could, I'm happy to entertain doing that with this program, is that a lot of this is volunteer driven, right? And so we will be, the volunteers will collect and disseminate the data. With regards to the data collection too, we really want a year's worth of data. But when we got in the weeds, we realized that, first of all, the voucher recipient has 60 days to redeem their voucher. Then if you want, like, Joan said, if you want an Urban Arrow, you get to order one and it might take 2 months for it to come in. So we can't, although we intend to collect data for 6 months on every single person, it's going to be staggered because we will not collect data on you until you take receipt of your bike. Does that make sense? So hope that answers your questions.
Natalie, did that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, I mean, I still have a gazillion questions,
okay,
but
sure.
that's great.
Oh, okay. Let's move on to Julie then.
Well, I was going to ask if we couldn't go ahead and spend the additional staff time to make it income related if we did this program so that you don't have people, living in multi-million-dollar homes. So I appreciate the mayor about how this really would be more fair if we were targeting the lower income people rather than just everybody. I also, what was my other question? Oh, I wanted to know if there was a way for, Nancy mentioned something about one of the programs having bikes that had the GPS on there that would help determine or record usage. Whereas I thought the program that you're suggesting requires the actual bike owners to report back on their odometer readings. Is there a way that we could get that data without having to rely on the bike owner to report their odometer to us or to you?
So most of the e-bikes are not GPS enabled. And so you would have to take an image of their odometer reading and submit that.
I see. Okay, well, I'd be really interested in putting some kind of an income limit on it. But I think it's a great idea. And I also would like to see us, even if we have to ponder for a bit the details, I think it makes sense for us to go forward with at least purchasing some of these lockers, deciding where they would go. I would much prefer to see the stuck in the ground versus concrete pad. Because that way we're inviting bicyclists to come here without worrying that their bike is going to be stolen during the day when they're at work, or it's going to get all rained on or pounded with the hail. So I think it makes sense for us to at least look at purchasing some of these lockers and making some decisions about how many and how much. And it certainly makes sense to put, some in Hiawatha. And I think if there's some in Soda Springs Park, they should be located behind the stage. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Natalie, I guess, I'm sorry, maybe I cut you off. Did you have some follow-on questions or?
No, I think we're
did.
heading in the right
Okay, yeah,
direction.
Okay, so any other questions? Okay, I guess, I don't want to be overly repetitious, but, it seemed like maybe several months ago, we talked a little bit about getting streetlight data on bicycles. And I followed up on that with Roy, and the cost is, it's pretty prohibitive for us. I looked at PPACG to see if they had it, and because Roy thought maybe they did for bicycles, and they don't, and it would be like $110,000 for PPACG, so they didn't get that. But in contrast, my understanding is that, the bike ride bikes are GPS enabled because, in the basic business strategy there is they don't want their bikes stolen. They would be able to collect information on trips, where the points of origin, the route, the destination, how long it took, what days it was being done, what time of the day. They would, I think, be able to collect that. I think it would be worth having a discussion with them to see what the alternatives were. What the alternatives are. It seems to be a lot less risk. And I'd like to entertain that idea. And I guess one of the things if a M2 resident were to go out and buy a $3,000 bike and they end up actually paying $2,500 out of pocket, in a couple months, I could see them selling it for $2,900 and pocketing $400, and somebody else is getting a good deal on a bike too. So I have a little concern about that. But at the same time, I'd like to see our streets be safe and inviting for bicyclists. Carl?
Sorry, can we go back to the streetlight data topic for just a second?
Sure, absolutely.
Just wanted to clarify possibly there. So my understanding is Manitou has access to that streetlight data through a licensing agreement with the PPRTA. So PPRTA pays for that. And so I think for me, the ask is our PPRTA representatives should go and ask that they expand that license to include bicyclists versus us trying to absorb that cost. And I think, because I think that would benefit the region. So just wanted to put that plug in.
Well, yeah, and to clarify, I checked with Roy, and he said it was too expensive for Manitou. And then when I checked with PPACG, they had looked at it and they said it was too expensive for them for what they were going to get. So, and I think what Andy, the guy that was here earlier, said it was like on the order of $110,000, and they didn't see that was, a topic of immediate interest, so they held off.
So there's a small irony in that because, a third of the population can't drive. So, that's basically saying we're not interested in collecting data on that segment of the population, but we can leave that be for now.
I can appreciate there's irony is a broad spectrum situation. Let's see, John and then Julie.
So just pretend for a moment that we approve this. can you tell me how this would kind of roll out? In other words, what's the public information campaign, the time frame, the whole 9 yards? Just help me with that.
Sure, I'll go high level and then if you want to follow up with questions, does that work for you? So it would, of course, start out with announcing it. As you can see, the postcards were budgeted, so there would be a mailed list to all Manitou Springs addresses that the city's aware of, so our water accounts. We would send a postcard out, of course, other forms of information sharing. And then it would be with a date and time that it starts. So pick a date, pick a time, and that's when you can begin applying. And then the hope would be, and the expectation, I would say, would be that it would go fairly quickly. So we wouldn't close it off at 125. We'd let everybody apply who would want to, and you'd maybe close it after, let's say, a week or whatever we decide on. And then after 10 business days, we would verify their residency through whatever method they provided. Most of the time, that would be through our utility billing office, who has information on their water account. But for some reason, if that won't work, there are other ways we can do it, such as leases or any number of things. And so then from there, we would issue a physical voucher with a unique ID and an expiration date 60 days ahead of when we issue that. And then that person would come to our parking office and pick that up with proof of ID. They'd go to the e-bike rental location, provide the voucher, proof of ID, and then the e-bike rental location would bring that voucher to us for $500, quote unquote, refunded back to them.
Can I clarify that? The bike shop, one of the 5 bike shops.
Sorry,
um,
I said rental place.
right.
I apologize.
And then after the voucher is received by the bike shop, then they provide us with the serial number of the bike. So we know what bike they bought, when they bought it, and then any information about did they order the bike and what, so we will have that data from the bike shop. So we'll then would keep in contact with the people and start data collection when the bike was actually when they took delivery of the bike. We did go 20 rounds over the waiver language, and we did make a decision that you have to accept when you sign that waiver that you have 60 days to use that waiver that's time stamped. And if there's some astronomical event that occurs, I don't imagine, I don't imagine what that could be. But anyway, that if you don't use that voucher in 60 days, then it expires and the next person on the list gets offered the voucher. And that's why we want to keep extending it until we get the max, because that's a data point. We want to know how many people apply. Do 120, do 50 people apply? Do 120, do 500, do 1,000? We don't know. So the last time the Denver e-bike rolled out their most recent voucher, they were gone in 23 minutes. So just so you know.
John?
Well, the reason why I was headed with this is what I'm wondering about is if we would shudder to do another survey, which is to basically announce like we're going to do this program, like we're somewhat intending on doing it, describe what it is as it's laid out. Okay. Maybe get some other options that we could pull together in, let's say, a week or so of maybe depicting a program like what the mayor's suggesting, which is sort of more to kind of a lease kind of a program or whatever you want to call that. And so you were anticipating that the window of time for people to sign up for this was going to be a week or 2 weeks?
Excuse me. Yes, we don't have that exact time. We would need to discuss that internally, but yeah, 1 to 2 weeks to where anyone who was interested would. But to be quite honest, the people who are extremely serious about it would be signing up the second the clock hits whatever time it starts.
Well, I guess what I'm curious about is if we did that kind of a thing, we would know through sort of kind of a survey that says, hey, if we did this kind of thing, this would be what people would be interested in. I think it has to be pretty definitive in terms of without you having to probably go shopping at a bike shop as to what the total rebate would be. I think you need to kind of set some people's expectations if we kind of did a survey with this and said, hey, the typical kind of an e-bike is X amount of dollars. The voucher would be this amount, right? You can anticipate spending X amount of dollars on a bike lock, a helmet, you know, whatever, that kind of stuff that you normally have to kind of outfit a bike with anyway when you leave the shop, whether it's safety lights or whatever. So I'm just asking the question in terms of could we do kind of a survey with this and figure out what the kind of demand would be, okay? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we got, 250 people who said, hey, they really are interested in this? What if instead certain people look at this and go, wow, okay, I have to spend $2,000 for a bike. The voucher is only going to give me $800. I'm kind of low income. That kind of leaves me, standing in the gap for $1,200. See what I mean? Maybe they might be interested in some kind of a different kind of a program. So I'm just trying to figure out what the harm would be of doing this kind of a thing in the time frame you're talking about of a week or 2 weeks or something like that, getting those postcards out and seeing what the demand would be. That might kind of change some people's minds in terms of just sort of kind of reading the room. Thank you.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
No, I think Julie was next, and then we'll come back to you, Judith. Julie?
In response to John Shada's comments, it seems to me that if we roll this out and we only get less than, 125, we're allowed to, let's say we only get 10. We'll know right away that only 10 people were interested. We close the application period after the 14-day or 10-day period or whatever, and then we can reevaluate and say, geez, maybe we better look at a less expensive option. So I'm not sure that the survey is essential to establish the interest, because people will know the interest, because if nobody calls, that 2 weeks will know that nobody wants to do this. So you kind of already have the data you need, perhaps. I don't know. I guess this isn't really a discussion back and forth, but I wondered, if a survey is really necessary, if we just roll it out and see what happens. If all the vouchers don't get used, that's fine. We could look at more of a rental situation. The other thing, though, that I really wanted to say is, and this is in response to the mayor's comments about, it feels like we're giving out Christmas presents. Like, why don't we buy people wheelchairs, And that really resonates with me. At the same time, I started thinking of these analogies of other things we do along those lines. So we decided to approve having the match money be spent to paint Rocky's building. Now, I know it's supposedly a museum that's never open, but really we're painting someone's private residence. And then we spent over $2 million to pay Paragon to go ahead and buy the LaFon property, which, that's a lot of money in terms of taxpayers' money. A lot of people residents would be blown away if we knew that the URA, that we let, that much money be given away. So in contrast to giving this business over $2 million with the hopes that they'll develop the property maybe someday, giving residents $100,000 to see if we can reduce congestion and traffic and pollution seems like not that big a deal. So we do things like that, where we give money to businesses, to residents, to Rocky's building. We do that kind of thing with the hope that in the long run, it'll have really good positive returns for the city. And I'd submit that this program is the same idea.
Okay, thank you. So Judith?
Well, the real takeaway for me, and the one thing I love, is that we are talking about an income requirement. We really struggled with that. And, we asked ourselves, can we pull this off with doing an income requirement? And I'm okay with adding an income requirement. I'd be thrilled to do that if we went with a low income, it's 80% of AMI per county. We would have to have some kind of proof of income. If Denise, would give the green light that we have some infrastructure, I'll volunteer my time. We have to be very cognizant of being, having people's confidential information and materials. But I would be happy to add that if that was the consensus. And I think that that's a great way to go. The Denver program proved beyond a shadow of the doubt that it was the low income people that had the most benefit, used the bike the most, and most of the recipients, maybe not most, I don't want to misquote this, a large number purchased cargo bikes because that they don't have a car. So they were using their e-bike for their main source of transportation, which is the goal. To Councillor Shada's point, Joan Stang, has done a tremendous amount of work, but I've had lots of conversations with Greg Cobble. These bike shops are willing to throw in some incentives like, hey, if you buy your bike here, we'll give you a helmet and a bike lock or something. And Greg's also willing to throw in some safety and tutorial stuff. I said, okay, Greg, what's your cheapest bike? What's your cheapest bike? What can I buy a bike for? He said, I have 2 on the floor right now that are used, refurbished bikes in outstanding condition, and I'm selling them for $600. So you can, there are deals to be had. There are deals to be had in this town. And I think that if we offered even some assistance, if, we put a low income requirement on it, we could help these recipients, purchase the correct bike. So, thank you.
Okay, let's see what we want to do here. Let's go around the table. Michelle.
I am for the program. Thank you.
Judith.
I wanted to add one thing, and yes, please add the income requirement. Thank you.
I would like to move forward with the program, and I am happy to discuss what it would take to add an income requirement.
Nancy.
One question, is this currently, do we currently have 100K in the budget for this?
This would come through the amended budget,
Amendment
and it would
process.
come out of mobility and parking. So it would come out of that project, not the general
So
fund.
it's not currently budgeted.
It is not currently
Okay.
budgeted. No.
I am for an e-bike voucher program. I just think I would just really, really, really want to go back and look at the state program because I think there's a lot of potential there. And the Pike Ride program, because there's a lot of potential there. And if some hybrid, I'm fine with, but I'm not for this program without looking at those 2 things in conjunction. And and part of the reason I like both of those programs is because they both have an income requirement.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to sound something like Mayor Pro Tem Fortune. I think we should have a discussion with Bike Ride and see what we might be able to arrange with them. I think it would achieve a lot of the objectives of what's proposed here without a whole lot of risk. We could collect some information and we could do this for a year, come back and take a look at the voucher program if it seemed like that was appropriate. Although I have real heartburn about giving, some of our residents $500 without means testing and not, if we're going to give money away, we should give it away to everybody equally. And I don't think we should give it away. I think we've got a lot of projects. We've gone through budget sessions and we know we've got some fundamental things we should address. So I don't think this would be the highest and best use of our money. But I do think we could achieve some things with a program like Bike Ride. We'd like to investigate that. John?
I think that we ought to go forward with this. I think it's worth a try. I'm with Councilor Wolf in terms of we see a lot of money leave here, sometimes in the millions of dollars with hardly even 10 minutes of discussion. And I think this is worth a try. I think we could learn a lot with it. I think we could fine tune this to the nth degree. But I'm ready to try it. Thank you.
Natalie?
I'm super excited by this project. I am certainly interested in hearing from Pike Ride. I think that's fantastic. I'm interested in the state program, and if it is complicated, I'm interested in us helping people apply for that, if that's something that we can help make that happen. And then with the e-bike, I am interested in the income requirement. And I'm also potentially interested in giving out fewer bikes, but giving out more money, like that it might be, again, 75 bikes, but we give everybody $1,000 and they can get everything they need versus funding part of it. And so I'm just kind of interested in that piece because I really want to make sure that the folks that are going to use it can do it. And I don't know if we're quite there with that 500. So that's,
Okay, thank you. Julie.
I'm supportive of the program. I'm supportive of starting it as soon as possible. I would like to see a means test, AKA for low income only. We'd have to discuss what that number would be and exactly what kind of documentation would be required. I don't think it'd be that complicated. You could go buy a W-2 or 1099 or an old tax return from last year if you have to. But we deal with that anyway. I think it would simultaneously be wise to follow through with the mayor's suggestion of talking to Pike Ride, getting them in here at ASAP when we have time for a work session and see if we can use that to supplement this program. I really want to get the lockers in place as well. It's really important to me that as to where they're located, I don't want to see any I don't want to see lockers, for example, anywhere near that little bear statue at the corner of Manitou Ave and Park Ave, and I want to make sure it's located well. And I have no objection to looking further at if somebody, a staff or someone wants to look into giving us more of a detailed review of the state law and how we might be able to help our residents to connect to that, or at least have the IPO have a link to that in all of the public information that we do. I think that's fine. I don't think these things have to be mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we've got a mix of things here. It does seem like those of you who are most supportive of the proposal here would at least like to see kind of some means testing or some low income stuff. So I guess what I would propose is that we ask this group to come back with a suggestion for the means testing, or for what can we do for low income, or the test. And I think that's a sentiment that several of you have voiced. And then, since it's going to take a little bit of time, I would suggest that we talk to Pike Ride and see if they're interested in coming and explaining their situation. So would anyone have any objection to that?
May I ask a follow-up on that?
Sure.
though? It seems to me that we would be able to, I mean, I've already, we know what the means testing is on these other programs that are already in place. So seems to me we could all get an email from this group from that within the next 24 hours, rather than having them physically come back and wait for an opening for work session, God knows when that would be. They can just email us tomorrow with their recommendations, say we want to do the same as how the state is doing it or what have you, and look at each county's average, mean, whatever the language is, and come up with a suggestion. And if we end up with hardly anyone applying, we may, a month or two later, decide we're going to increase the means test just a bit, or take a look, like Natalie said, at maybe reducing the number of future vouchers to give out, but increasing the amount for the voucher, or, tweaking it. But I think it's important to get started as soon as possible. And I'd really like to see some information on the cost and purchase of the lockers so we can go forward with that.
Well, we have I think an estimate here for the lockers.
I guess we'd have to know how many we're approving.
I think what was the suggestion for 8? I think 8 lockers.
I don't recall.
It was for a quantity of 8, and the suggested price, if we were to rent them out, is $1 an hour. And we looked at other communities to so that would be another piece of it is.
And would all 8 be together in the same location, or would it be 4 and 4 with the 2 Hiawatha and
You can arrange them in a circle You can split them
However-
in half. You can stack them and the stakes are really long stakes. It's not like you can pull this thing out and steal it. It's, you know, once it's staked in, but it's our understanding, it does not require a concrete pad.
John,
I guess I have some angst about this rental of these bike locker things. I am against that. I think we ought to be building an infrastructure in which employees can ride their bikes downtown and park them. I think that is unreasonable to charge $1 an hour for stuff that we're trying to get people to change their behavior to do. I think it's about as crazy as charging 25 cents to ride the Route 33. Okay, I think it's nickel and diming of stuff. I think it's needless infrastructure in terms of taking payment and tracking that and all that other kind of stuff. Seems like to me this infrastructure would be a lot cheaper. Okay, without all that paraphernalia of accepting payments and hours and what happens if your credit card doesn't work. I mean, I spent my weekend watching people try and use our kiosks. Okay. The average amount of time to figure out how to use our kiosks is 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay. That's a really long time. Okay. To try and figure out how to kind of get just a stub. And you can imagine that probably a good 50% of those people show up without even the license plate. They have to go back and go find the license plate or go ferry somebody to get it. So to me, that is the real sticking point I have over these bike lockers. If we're talking about doing things locally, okay, $1 an hour, that's a real big barrier to people who are working downtown in little tiny shops in which you could not bring your bike and put it inside. And that's why I was, interested in these bike lockers, getting them down in the central core where they're really used. So that's my only comment about this bike locker and this dollar thing. Thank you.
thank
We
you.
really struggled with that too. So thank you for that comment. May I ask one more thing? And that is, it's my understanding, and Denise, tell me if I'm wrong, we have 15 employees, city employees that also live in Manitou. Is that still the correct number?
I don't want to
Okay.
say,
I'm going to throw out this
Positively.
idea just to percolate on. I'm fine with it having an income requirement, but I think it would be really awesome to offer our city employees some kind of incentive. There's not very many of them. If we could get them riding an e-bike and putting it in a free locker, I think that would be an employee perk that I think that we could support. So just a thought, just throwing it out there.
We've talked about this for a long time and we're coming up with more. We're bogging down more than anything, I think. But Julie, you better have an answer that everybody likes.
I'm going to make it so quick that you'll be happy. This is super quick. I just want to say, I also agree, at least for the first year, that we should not charge for the lockers because we're trying to incentivize this thing. We want to encourage things. And if we're going to have an employee who has to spend, an entire hour of his 6-hour day working here, paying for their locker, that's kind of a bummer. So I would rather that we not charge for the bike lockers, at least for the first year, and then reevaluate, because I don't want to discourage people from using them.
Okay. Denise,
Mayor, and I would defer to the group, but it sounds like there's still some work that they need to do to work out a few things and to figure out. I'd like to recommend that we get this on the next work session or do a special meeting if the council wants to move quickly on this, but to give us a little bit of time to process and to really vet some of the things. I hate to roll out a program in a rush because then we end up with crisis every time. So I think we need some time to vet it and then bring it back with all of your recommendations that you've made and really talk to Pike Ride and the state and move forward. So right now, the first work session would be July 11th, unless if this council wanted to do some type of other meeting to get this moving quicker, but we do need at least a week, I think, to process everything somewhere around that time.
Well, I think so. And something we really haven't gone into very much is what's the overhead going to be on city staff? It looks like we'd have some administrative overhead. Don't know how huge that would be if we're going to be doing a survey and collecting information. We've got overhead there, and we've sort of just assumed that this is these aren't part of the lift, and the lift I think is going to be a little heavier than what we anticipate. Like so I would advocate putting this on the work session as well. That would be July the 11th, and at that point we could get recommendations from this group, the voucher group, and we could maybe get some information from Pike Ride. Might not hurt to sleep on this too.
I just have a quick logistical question.
Okay,
We're not meeting on July 4th.
that's
Right.
correct.
So does that mean we just skip that council meeting, or is the 11th a work session, or is it a regular council meeting?
Right now, it's the 11th is a work session. We actually, I don't think we've got that much urgent business. I would next week's meeting is going to have, it's going to be a fairly meaty meeting. But the 27th, so 2 weeks from tonight, is CML. So my hope is that we don't need a work session, because if we do, we're going to have to figure out another night to have it. And then the following week, the 4th of July, I thought we'd take that off. So it would be the 11th. Is it?
Did you say that
Better.
we're not having a meeting one night because a bunch of us will be at CML? Did I
Right, yeah,
understand that?
June the
What if we
27th.
what if we have a special work session one night that week, or Saturday morning or something to make up for that, so we can move forward with this? Is that,
Is
like
that-
Denise mentioned, we could maybe just schedule something a little different. I'd be open to doing that. Because
Okay.
if we're gonna have the 11th Pike Ride people come, then there's gonna be a whole nother meeting to digest Pike Ride versus I just don't want this, I don't want the summer to go past before we have a chance to get started. So I'd be very willing to come in a different night of the week, or a Saturday or Sunday or something, if others would be interested.
I would, sorry,
Go ahead, Nancy.
I would actually prefer the 11th. I think that gives, 3 weeks to come up with some implementation instructions and a little bit more research, because if we're going to do this program, I would like it to be set up for success. And I think that there's the devil's in the details, and I know a lot has been worked out, but a solid set of implementation instructions. Do we need an ordinance for this, Denise?
No, you don't need an ordinance. It would just be a program, and you would budget, and then we would implement.
So anyway, I think that the 11th is actually a good day to do it on.
The best way to do this is, as I'm looking at this is really a program. And so you tell us what you want to do, and we figure out the how. So if you at the next meeting say you're going to give 60,000 or 70,000 for it, then that allows this group to go and implement it, and we can definitely update you with all the details. But that way we're not having to come and ask for approval for every single thing, which is really gets in the weeds, and it does delay it. So if that is something we could do, is at the next meeting, if this council so chose, say, please bring back a budget request, we would bring it back. You would then choose to approve whatever you wanted, and it would allow this group to start implementation and really work the details out.
It still begs the question. I guess I would advocate that we do this on July the 11th at the work session. It's CML is, I think is it 5 of us that are going, or 4? Who's going to CML? So it's 4, okay. And Denise, yeah. And we've also got a couple other things that are critical. We've got a presentation for the library, the PPLD next week, and the day after CML, Denise and I need to be in Denver to go out and shake our tin cup to get money out of DOLA for the water tank. So in the intervening time, it's not like nothing's happening. There's quite a bit going on. So I would ask council's indulgence and let us come back to this on the 11th. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. All right. So let's put this on the 11th. That gives you a little bit of time to think about, doing some income means testing. That sounds good. Okay, thanks, everybody. Let's take a 15-minute break and then we'll come back to hear from the police. Okay, if we can get started again, we'll address our last discussion item. It's an update on the
You're thinking it's not
co-responder
4th
unit
of
from the
July.
police department.
We're seeing
We
that.
have Chief Otto here and several of his officers. So Chief, you've got the floor.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. What we're going to do is give a quick update on how the MCR unit's doing. We went live on March 1. I've got a couple slides prepared. We'll go through, then I'm going to introduce you to our team and then answer any questions you may have on it. And there we go. Okay, our personnel. I am the program director. Commander Savine is the manager. Primary officer is Officer Schulke to my left. Secondary officer who's not here, he worked day shift today, is Officer Juan Marino. And he will fill in when Officer Schulke's on vacation, ill or whatever. Then we have, she's not here as well, UC Health Manager Andrea Wood. She works at the hospital. She's in charge of the program and a whole bunch of other things at the hospital. Holly actually works for her. And then we have Holly Bradbury. She rides around in the car with Officer Shockley all day. Next slide. Some of the duties, and I know I've talked about this before when we were trying to put this together, so I'll just give them to you real quick. We respond to mental health calls promptly. We support other agencies with mental health incidents, connect community members with necessary resources, conduct follow-ups to check on individuals' well-being. And I think these two will have an interesting story to give you on that when we get to them. Arrange transportation for those requiring further mental health assistance, perform regular patrol duties between mental health calls, aid Manitou Springs School District 14 in providing mental health services for students. So there's a whole bunch of things in there we do. We've got this team that we focus on mental health stuff. When they're not doing that, and they're doing a lot of it, we'll get some stats here in a minute, but they're doing regular patrol things. They're backing up other officers on calls and stuff like that. So they stay busy. Next. History. I started talking with everybody early in 2022 about this. It was a long process. We worked with, she no longer works there, Billy Radcliffe, Andrea Wood, and a couple of their CEOs. Hired a clinician. They actually hired the clinician for us in June of 2022. We were part of that hiring process, meaning we got to help listen in on the interviews, ask questions as well. Created a SOP, shared it with UC Health, made sure they approved of it, that we're doing things with their people the way they wanted things done. Signed an IGA with the hospital June 7th, and we went live March 1 of this year. Our officers and clinicians underwent 3 weeks of training before handling calls independently. And what that looked like was we had Officer Schulke riding with other units within our region to see what a co-responder officer does and watch how they respond to calls and what they do. We had Holly, Andrea, we talked about her a minute ago. She's the coordinator over at UC Health. She rode along with this team and made sure Holly was doing what she was supposed to be doing and how she was supposed to be doing it. Talk about some stats real quick. We went live on March 1. One of the categories there, and these aren't all the categories that officers do. These are just kind of broken down what our mental health unit kind of focuses on. Their calls for service in March were 40. 32 of those were mental health, 4 mental health transports, and Holly can explain more on that. She can do it much better than I can. 24 officer initiated contacts, and that's when an officer goes out there and stops somebody on a street to say, hi, how you doing? Maybe it might involve a criminal investigation, but a lot of times it's just stopping to say hi to people. 2 stamp calls for, that should be, no, I'm sorry, 2 stamp calls for people experiencing homelessness. And I talked before about when we're stamping calls, and what we're doing is our officers are pushing a button or having dispatch annotate that, you know, this person that we've contacted is experiencing homelessness or mental health issues. And in that March timeframe, we had 20 stamped mental health calls. So what we've done is identified between the two of them, 22 different people that we've contacted that are either homeless or have mental health. And that helps out all the officers in this whole region everywhere. We know what we're getting into a lot of times, or the officers do when they make a contact. Okay, next one. I'm gonna do 2 more slides and then we can. April, 35 calls for service, not too much difference. 31 mental health calls, not too much different. Same on the transports, the OIA stuff. The homelessness calls or stamp calls were exactly the same at 2 and 21 stamp mental health calls. Next one. We had an uptick a little bit here, 44 calls, 30 mental health, 4 transports. OIA, our stamp calls for homelessness. We're getting into that time of year again where we're starting to see more of the homeless coming to town. So we've got just a few more of those and 27 stamped mental health calls. Introductions again, Officer Jeff Schulke to my left, and then we have Holly Bradbury, LPC. Help me with the LPC again, license. All right, they've got MAs, CBs, BCs. I can't keep up with them. I will hand this off to them. They can say something real quick and then we can take any questions.
Hello, I'm Officer Schulke.
How long have you been with the office?
I've been with the police department for 3.5 years now. I've been CIT certified, which is crisis intervention training, for about 3 of those. So I got that pretty early on. And so that's specialized training in mental health.
And that is one of the requirements, in order to apply to be part of the officer has to be CIT certified.
And I'm Holly Bradbury. I started
Get
out,
the mic about 3 inches from your mouth there. Yeah.
I started out in the hospital doing the evaluations, which I also do those on the road. So that's where the LPC comes in handy. Do you want to talk about
Okay. Thank you. Questions and comments from council? Julie?
Can you tell me what kind of evaluations you do? What does that mean? Just so we can try to relate.
I do mental health evaluations to determine if people are a threat to themselves or others, any other kind of dangers that might exist, or also explore protective factors which might keep them from harming themselves or others.
Thank you. And also, we go back on the slide. I had a question about one of the things. Oh, that's good enough. What is, I don't understand OIA. So an officer goes up in the street, says, hello, Julie. I say hello, and that's one. That can't make sense. What's the, how do you get 24 times in the month the officer said hello to somebody on the street, and that's a statistic? I must have missed something.
No, that's just kind of a simplified way to explain it. But in this case, the officer initiated contacts, we're only recording the ones that are mental health related. So this is us when we're not being called by dispatch to respond to a call, we're proactively going and either contacting someone and it's involving mental health in some way, or we're doing follow-up with some of the people that we've identified from previous contacts as people that need this mental health help.
I see. And how often, if you know, are the calls from the same people every month? Or, you know, like 40 calls were 28 of them from the same person? You know what I mean? Like the person who calls 911 twice a day?
No, so the 40 calls for service is all of the calls for service that I responded to. So the difference between those 32 mental health calls and the 40 calls for service is 8 of those I was responding to just regular police type calls, covering other officers on that sort of thing.
I see. So of the 32 mental health calls, are those 32 different people? Or can the same person call you twice a day?
Same person can call. And
Are you
It-
seeing a lot of repeat people, repeat problems?
Yes.
Repeat problems?
Yes.
And really how many, because it doesn't matter if we have 12 serious mental health problems in town that are constantly calling the police, it doesn't matter if the stats show that we've got 80 calls to mental health calls or I'm just curious about the repeat. I don't want to call it offenders, but the repeat problem people. What, if anything, are you able to do to help them, or there's probably not much you can do? You just keep going out 30 times a month, or how does that work?
I would say that it does matter, even if we are going to the same people, because part of what we do is diverting resources and keeping those resources available. So what I mean by that is other patrol officers can stay available to be available for other calls for service, other emergencies, stuff like that. They don't necessarily have to be going to these calls with these people all the time. We've had people that we've reduced their 911 calls where they're contacting us directly rather than calling into 911, tying up all those resources from the call taker, the dispatcher, the officers, and all of that. And then we've also, I'll use this time to kind of give some success stories. One of them is there's a woman that's been a resident in Manitou as long as I've worked here. And in that time, I've met her on many calls for service, and I had never seen her sober. She was a very extreme alcoholic. Early in our time on this team, I believe our first week or maybe second week, we had a call for service with her where we provided her some resources. She didn't go to the hospital or anything like that at that time, but we gave her some resources. She ultimately took advantage of those. And at this point, she's almost 2 months sober. And this is someone that I had literally never seen sober in my entire time here. So we actually went and gave her a police department coin to kind of commemorate that for her. And this is one of the people that we do visit. For a while, we were going once a week to go see her, but it's dialed back to about once every 2-3 weeks now.
Can you give us a rough idea of how many people in town are having mental health, making mental health calls? Like in other words, the number of people I'm interested in, not just how many times the same person might have called you that month. Do you have a rough idea?
Yeah, it really does vary. For instance, one person that we were going to visit once a week, and was, this is one that I was talking about where we're diverting them from calling 911. Instead of that, they're calling us directly, and suddenly no more 911 calls from this person when she was calling multiple times a week. With our help, they've been able to get her into assisted living. So, the people that we're seeing changes every month, especially as we're kind of able to help them get onto a better track, so then they don't necessarily need to see us quite as frequently. But to answer your question, I don't have statistics on which people were, or how many total people we're seeing.
Nancy. Oh, I'm sorry, Chief. Did you have?
It's just something to touch on what Jeff did. The mental health calls, when our officers are getting dispatched out, Jeff mentioned they're time intensive, and they are. From the time the call comes into dispatch to the time the officers dispatch to it, arrive on scene, it's not a quick call. And that's where Holly's expertise comes in and helps us out a lot. She can provide those resources. She has that professional ability to say this person would benefit from whatever programs are out there. Officers just don't have that kind of training. And they are, even with Holly, they're time intensive. And I think counsel will, to answer your question, I don't, maybe it was answered, I don't know, but there are typically and historically repeat callers. The same people call all the time. They do. And a lot of that's because they haven't been given resources in the past. It's always been a cop showing up at the door. Are you okay? You're not going to do anything yourself or anybody else? Okay. If you need anything else, call us back. And lo and behold, they call us back. And they always do. And I say always, that's been my experience. And I think Jeff and Holly in her short time with this can probably say the same thing.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks. I'm very excited about this program and I'm so glad that you were able to implement this. Couple questions. One is where the funding is not from the city, correct? And if not, how long will it last?
No money from the city at all. UC Health has a grant, which takes care of Holly's salary. We're working on a car for us. They're gonna donate a car, and their only stipulation is if we would agree to put, basically not have Manitou Springs take all the credit for putting this resource out on the streets. They put UC Health on the side of the car when they can finally come up with the car for us. Absolutely, we said yes. The contract that we signed, it's an IGA, 30 days notice on either side to terminate it, but there's no end date to it, if that is more to the point to the question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, there's no end date to it.
My second question is, Holly, good to see you again. Who covers nights and weekends then? How is that dealt with?
Right now, we have one team. I really don't anticipate doing much more than that. We are on a Monday through Thursday schedule. 11 to 8:30, 9:30. The other ones, the hours that they're off or after they get off, or they're on days off or whatever. If it's a straight mental health call, we know it's a mental health call. Our officers and Holly, they're identified in dispatch as being CIT trained and that we have a clinician on board. The other agencies in our area have the same thing. So we help out other agencies, they help out us. And it's been working pretty well. I haven't had any complaints from any other agencies that we're not helping or they've done anything wrong. I've heard nothing but positive reaction. They're happy to have us as a resource. We're happy to have EPSO and CSPD coming out and helping us when ours are off, when our people are off.
Thanks. And my last question is, after 3 months, not very long to implement, but I'm assuming you're collecting lessons learned. And do you see the program evolving in any way? And is there anything that you need from us to keep the program appropriately staffed, growing, whatever, what is needed?
I definitely think we've been learning lessons and kind of as a team, we're becoming more comfortable with dealing with certain things. And for instance, Holly, her background is in schools as a school counselor, primarily with elementary students. So I could see from when we started her comfortability dealing with children, which surprisingly we deal with a lot of suicidal children. How comfortable she was dealing with them versus with adults that are doing the same things. And over, the 3 months that we've been doing this, she's become way more comfortable working with these adults, as she gets more exposure to that. As far as what we need, we need a car, but we'll see if that happens with UC Health.
When we started this whole process, a car, UC Health was working on getting us a car. It wasn't as simple as it sounded at first, like, hey, we're just going to give you a car. Now they have to go through a grant. Yeah. And it's a little bit tougher, but they're still working on it. But they, like I said earlier, they take care of Holly's salary, the computer, her uniforms. We pay nothing. We have that resource out there on the street anyway. As far as an officer in a car. And now we've added that Holly's position that costs us as a city and as a police department, nothing extra.
So if you have somebody where you're concerned that they, need whatever it is, a 72-hour hold or whatever they do here, where do they go to Turning? Where do they go for that assessment to be made so they can be legally locked up? Where do they go?
I actually do the assessment and the placement. So the whole idea of the program is to not have so many people going to the emergency room and spending a long time waiting to get what they need in terms of an evaluation and then placement to a facility. So Colorado Springs has two mental health hospitals, Cedar Springs and Peakview, that we always try to place them there first. And so far we've had luck.
Oh, okay. So you,
Finding.
as an LPC, you have authority to do the placement?
I do, yes.
Are you a MALPC?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I thought you had to be an MD or something. And is it a 72-hour hold?
It is a
Do they
72
notify you when the person's being released so you know they're coming back?
No, they do not notify
Oh.
me, but I usually
the police.
can tell when they're gonna be sent out because we take them there, so I know when the clock starts and then approximately when it ends. Because I
So
write,
usually they're out after the 72 hours.
typically, yes, we've had some cases where the family has reached out and said, you know, our loved one is still in the hospital, what can I expect now? And they'll lean on us for support in terms of that too.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council or comments? I guess not. Well, I think I'd like to thank you all for what you're doing. I think this is it's a good inroad. It's addressed a problem I think our officers in the past have expressed concerns about. I think this is a more humane and efficient way of doing things. I hope you're finding it a rewarding situation that you're helping people with a bigger box of tools to respond to situations. So thank you very much. Keep us informed if you need something. I think council is interested in seeing this program succeed. So we're pleased to the degree that you've carried it this far, and we wish you continued success. Thank you very
all.
much.
Thank you. That's all we have for an update. If there's anything else.
Sounds
Have it
good. I
all?
think, yep. Cheers.
I'm with
Thanks for your patience earlier. It took
All
a
right.
while to get to you. Cheers.
Night.
Okay, council, let's see. Anybody got anything for council correspondence? And Natalie,
You know, I did mention that I wanted to talk about potentially the 3rd of July being a day off for staff. I
yes,
don't know
and
how to-
excuse me, I will mention Counselor Michelle sent an email to me later this afternoon too, to the same effect. So please continue.
I don't know how to have that conversation in a public setting, but I'm interested in having that conversation.
Okay, so council is familiar. We all got an email from Denise saying that she wanted to give the city employees the 3rd of Monday, July the 3rd off. My understanding is a paid holiday. I responded, I think I was the first to respond and said, no, I'm not in favor of this. So if we want to discuss it, we can put it on the agenda for next week. We can go around the table and see what everybody's pleasure is. So I guess the options are we can put it on next week's agenda and discuss it. Or we can drop it. So, Michelle?
Can we not just give it to them?
What's that?
Can we not just give it to them? Do we have to discuss
We
it?
can discuss it. I think we should discuss it rather than just give it to them.
Okay, then,
I don't think we have a precedent for this, frankly.
okay, then I'm fine with discussing it on the 20th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Judith?
I'd like to discuss it further on the 20th.
Okay, Nancy?
Yeah, I'll discuss it further, but I'll give you my thoughts right now if you want them. I'm not particularly at this point in time in favor. We just gave Juneteenth last year as a holiday. So and maybe it's just my background is, you wanted a day off, you had to take a day off. You didn't just assume you get a paid day off on when the rest of the state has the day off. So I might be convinced, but at this point, my initial going in reaction is probably no.
Okay. If council wants to discuss it, if a majority of council wants to discuss it, I'll discuss it, but I'm definitely not in favor of it. I think we've done a lot over the last several years to increase the pay scale to make things more attractive. We've increased benefits and we gave them, let's see, among the minor holidays, I believe they get Indigenous Peoples' Day, Juneteenth, and I think President's Day off. So I think I think compensation is fair, and I think this is overkill. So I'm against it. John,
I don't mind discussing it.
okay, for discussing it. And Natalie, you want to discuss it?
Yeah,
And-
and I do have one other item too before.
Okay, okay, and Julie?
I don't mind discussing it. And while I'm at it, just so I don't forget, I'd like to appear by phone next Tuesday because I'll be out of town.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. So we'll expect you by phone. Okay, we'll put it on the agenda to discuss. That'll be for June the 20th. Okay, Natalie, you had something else?
Yeah, so one, I just wanted to say, happy Pride Month, and we have Pride Fest in Manitou on Saturday. And I would like to bring forward a proclamation for Tuesday next week, if that is amenable.
Can you have it to the city clerk by noon tomorrow?
Yep.
Anybody object?
I approve.
Go ahead, do it. Have it in by noon tomorrow. Anything else, council correspondence? Okay. Denise, do you have anything?
Mayor, I don't have anything tonight. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, great. This being a work session, we don't need a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.